Mr. Fong.
Hello, everyone. My apologies. Of course, it's the tech careers in tech that was too
Stuffed up
eager,
the tech.
sending too many links.
That's hilarious. All right, let's kick off. Go ahead,
Hi,
Chris. Over to you.
everyone. Thank you for making the time this evening to hear from some illustrious Old Boys. First of all, thank you to the president of the Sydney High School Old Boys Union, Paul Harrapin. Paul is based in Singapore now. He just moved there a couple of months ago, where he heads up Stripe's Asia Pacific and Japan's office, and has a great global role. And he's going to be one of the panelists. He's invited me to actually be the moderator. Paul graduated from High in '83, as you saw in his bio. I'm here from 1997, where Anton was a classmate. Hey, Anton. He is the CTO of SIM. He will tell you more about what SIM or CIM is. But I think everyone may have Googled him and found that he was actually the first employee of Atlassian. So any of you who are interested in trying to figure out how to join awesome tech companies founded in Australia, I'm sure he has some good tips as well.
It'll be a fun story to hear.
Going over to Kirill. Kirill was the 7th employee of Afterpay. So he can tell some great stories about his background as well and how he did that. And the man who funds all of these startups, whether it's Stripe, whether it's Atlassian, whether it's Afterpay, it's the man Alex. Alex is a COO and partner at Blackbird. Blackbird, I would say, is the foremost and was the first, the foremost, and clearly a very prominent venture capital firm here in Australia. And he'll talk to you more about what they do and tell you more about perhaps what you could be doing there. The reason why we're doing this session is Paul was saying, how can we really help current students explore careers in tech? And we've done a panel in business, in law. This is the tech related one. I'm going to change my name here. I've logged in as Anton here, but what you can see behind me is a 2019 visit. You can sort of see current students. Some of you may be perhaps in these photographs, but thanks to Paul and the Old Boys Union, as well as Dr. Kim Jager, the principal, as well as the Industrial Arts Department, they brought 30 students from year 9 to year 12 onto a tech tour. You can see they went to Google X, they went to Tesla, the students at the table, that's Twitch, part of Amazon, to do a workshop. You can see they also went to Stanford over there as well. We also went to Facebook, outside Apple too. So it was a great trip for all these students to really get hands-on and see what happens in these tech companies. So we can't bring the students to Silicon Valley this year. We thought we'll bring Silicon Valley to you by having this illustrious panel share more about their background. So I've asked all of them to share more a bit about themselves. So Paul, why don't you start and then we'll go to specific questions after that. And feel free to start chatting away and asking questions if you have questions for this panel too. Thank you, Paul.
Sure, Chris. As Chris mentioned, I finished High in '83, so I'm by far and away the oldest person on this call, more towards the back end of my career than the beginning. But at school, I was, all over sport, cricket, rugby, anything that I could get my hands on, I was into. And I studied really what I was passionate about, which was, I only studied 4 subjects. I studied 3-unit Latin, 3-unit ancient Greek language, 3-unit maths and English. So, and I felt, people used to look at me strangely, but I felt that if you study what you're passionate about, you're going to do really well. And as it turns out, I did, well enough to get into what I wanted to do, which was an economics degree at Sydney University. Now, I always thought of myself going into a career in banking or finance. As it turns out, back in those days, companies came on campus. I'm sure it's probably, well, not now in COVID, but in some way it's very similar. And they came on and you could arrange interviews and speak to all these different companies, and I did. But I wanted to practice my interview skills. So, as I also spoke to the Macquarie banks and NABs and so on, I wanted to fill the list out. So I knew of IBM. These computers were sort of, well, I think we got our second Apple Mac in Sydney High the term 4, the year I left in '83. So if that gives you some historical perspective on our school's use of technology, we had 2 or 3 in the maths room on level 2. That was it. And so I put IBM down and I did the interview, and they just made it sound an amazing career. You get to learn all of these different things. You get to travel around the world. You can live in other countries in the world. And ultimately, that's what I started doing. I found after about 6 years that the big company structure didn't really fit me. So I joined a little startup out of Austin, Texas. IBM bought that startup back in 1996 for just under $900 million, which is probably 10 or 11 billion in today's money. And I stayed on, moved up to Singapore to build a business up there. Then I joined another startup. We got bought by a listed US company within about 9 months for $500 million. And then this thing happened where every technology stock was highly, highly valued and companies were being sold for crazy amounts of money. And then it all fell down and collapsed in a big hole. So I took that opportunity to start my own business, and then ended up selling it to Telstra, joined another small startup out of Silicon Valley called VMware. We built that from 3 people to 3,000 over 6 years. I then did another startup for 6 years, and now I'm in Stripe, which is the biggest startup in the world today. So that's sort of where I came from and how I came to be doing what I'm doing today. Fun journey.
Great, thank you. Alex, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I was class of 2000, and if you think about my journey, I was always interested in economics, finance, and business. And a big part of that was due to actually a teacher at Sydney Boys High, a great man by the name of Philip Day, who was also an old boy and devoted a big chunk of his life to Sydney Boys High. I'm pretty sure there's a prize for him at the school to this day. I'm sorry, a prize in his name. So as a cautionary tale to you all, I did a law degree and a commerce degree, and I did a law degree because I got the marks, which is just not the right way to go about things in terms of, the exact opposite of what Paul had to say about following your passions. And then I got caught up, as you go through uni, there's this whole law process when you're doing a law degree of summer clerkships. And it's like this almost like a competition of how many clerkship offers you can get. And so I got caught up in that craziness and ended up as a lawyer at Baker & McKenzie, which is a big global law firm. Despite not enjoying my law degree, not ever wanting to be a lawyer, and being much better at the finance side of things. So I lasted about 9 months as a lawyer there, and ended up moving into investment banking at an American bank called JP Morgan, where I stayed for sort of nearly a decade in both Sydney and London. So I got to travel with that, which was pretty amazing. And then I sort of wanted to get into a business that had a better culture and somewhere where I could move the needle, and that led me to Blackbird, which is a venture capital firm, and we'll talk a bit more about what venture capital is later. And in terms of the smallest of small worlds, Anton was actually an investor in our first fund back in 2012, and that investment's going quite well for him as he nods away. And so I think that the message from me really is, to think about challenging your perceptions of, what you want to do through university and beyond. Certainly, when I did my business law degree, the path was investment banking or law, and I certainly, maybe I was just naive, but I wasn't aware of these incredible opportunities in the startup world. And obviously that was, 15 years ago that I was finishing uni. And the message certainly from me is there is an amazing startup universe happening right here in Sydney, centered actually around Surrey Hills. And there's a path for all sorts of skill sets, whether you're finance or business minded or legal, or you're amazing at sort of software engineering or any other kind of engineering. Challenge your perceptions about going into work for the big company or the name brand, the JP Morgan or the big law firm or whatever it might be, because there's better cultures, better opportunities, and more interesting things available if you sort of think of a different path. I'll tell you one thing. At Blackbird, we run another firm called StartMate, and StartMate is trying to do things in the startup ecosystem, and it has a fellowship for uni students. So when you start at uni, think about the StartMate fellowship, because what that's trying to do is to take great people who are uni students and introduce them to these startups that may not have a formal grad program, but you get exposure, and then hopefully once you graduate, you can transition in. I've got lots more to say, but I'll pause there.
Great, thank you so much, Alex. Kirill.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated from high in 2008. In high, I did swimming, I did water polo, football, part of the orchestra as well. So I dabbled in a bit of everything. I ended up at UNSW, which was quite interesting because I spent 6 years of my life traveling from home to Sydney Boys High, and then I spent another 4 years just going a little bit further for uni. Did a double degree in commerce and economics. That was my passion at the time. Managed to triple major in economics, finance, and accounting. And I guess during uni, I taught microeconomics at one stage, and I was also co-head of the Australian Economics and Business Studies competition for a year. So I'm not sure if that's still going on, but City Boys High generally did quite well at that competition. So that was pretty fun. There was like a group of 10 of us, and we wrote all the questions, dealt with all the admin and stuff. So very rewarding. My first full-time job out of uni was actually at PwC as an auditor. Not something that I particularly enjoyed. And we can get into that a bit later. I left PwC, I think just shy of 2 years, and I joined Afterpay. I'm now a senior manager within finance, and I look after, or I should say, focus on customer strategy, which is pretty much just revolves around, new products. How do we kind of incentivize loyalty, and how do we make our kind of value proposition that little bit more compelling.
That's awesome. Right on cue, Anton, we have Lily asking, did anyone study engineering or science degree in uni? So Anton, why don't you close it up with the introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated in 97 there with Chris. I was kind of a geek from the start, to answer that question. So I didn't really do a lot of sport, I must admit. It was all about sort of as much maths and science as I could do, and as little of English and sport as I could do. And then, my mother obviously wanted me to be a doctor, and the worst case, a lawyer. But I loved computers too much. And so much that I think it'd probably be the first time I didn't listen to my mother, and I disobeyed, and I did a co-op degree in IT. Definitely highly recommend the co-op scholarships. I think that's a scholarship degree. I think they're still out there. And the good news for you is that I think at the moment they actually come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. So you can actually do a computer science co-op scholarship, as well as a software engineering co-op scholarship. And I think there's a lot of them. Back when I was doing it, there was only really a couple of degrees. So I chose one of them. And the great part about those degrees is that you actually get work experience as part of doing university. So by the time you graduate, it does take 4 years instead of 3 to do a regular bachelor. You can actually squeeze your honors into those 4 years as well if you work a little bit harder. But you do get 18 months of full-time work experience. So you at 3 different companies. So you actually get exposed to what the working world is like, right? Because the truth is it's quite different to definitely high school and even university, very, very different. And kind of when you graduate from university, having that experience under your belt, I think it helps you choose exactly what you want to do. So after 4 years of co-op at UNSW, I actually graduated right after that explosion that Paul referred to. So the dot-com boom just ended, and then became a dot-com crash. And finding a graduate position was really, really hard. So I actually jumped into Qantas. So Qantas was a company that was doing still reasonably well. So they were still hiring people. And I spent a year looking after their website. I don't know what they were thinking of allowing a graduate to look after their website. But it was definitely an interesting sort of job where responsibility was probably the biggest thing I've learned. So whenever that thing is down, I used to get calls from all sorts of high-ranking people in the company who kind of taught me finance and how much this affects their revenue and share price. But I guess my passion was always in writing software, right? So when I said I loved computers, I actually always felt that, what can you be doing in IT if it's not writing software? That was kind of my vision. That was a very narrow vision. The truth is there's a lot of things you can do, but from that perspective, that was kind of my approach to it back then. And then two mates of mine gave me a call and said, if you're not too busy and you kind of want to take a risk, jump into this little company that we're starting. And the thing that got me really excited is that it was very hard, especially in Australia back then, to actually find a job where you got to develop software, right? You could run a website and you could maybe actually contribute towards creating that website, but it was a website for one company, right? Like you weren't building a software product in the sense like, for example, Microsoft Office, for example, was probably one of the most famous pieces of software back then. So creating something you could actually give to other people, to millions of people to use, was something that I always kind of, like I said, I thought that's what doing computers is all about. So I jumped in to Atlassian when it was about 3 people. So they had a couple of contractors. I was sort of their first full-time employee. And as a small company, because VC in Australia kind of didn't exist too much, I suppose. So we all kind of had to do it on our own accord. And Alex will probably kind of tell you a bit more about what VC is all about and what that means. But with us, everyone had to sort of do everything, right? So we did sales by day, we did invoice processing, we did support. And then at night, when everyone went to sleep, we actually we wrote this software that we were selling. And little by little, the software actually managed to sell, and the company was hiring, growing people. And about 3 years into it, I went into leadership. So I started looking after software development teams. And those teams sort of became larger, and then more time passed and larger, and sort of moved around the company to look after different software development teams. And roughly after about 11 years, I kind of came to a point where to do something else inside Atlassian, I would actually have to go to the US because I kind of ran out of things to do on this side of the world. And I also kind of really wanted to work for another, like I kind of thought, I probably can spend the rest of my life at this company really, but I do want to work for some other company at least once. So I made the decision to jump into another startup that also built software products called Safety Culture. Alex definitely invested into that, and those guys are doing really well at the moment. It was an interesting sort of part, jumping into a company that were just sort of taking off, I think, and they were Townsville, so a Queensland-based company, and they needed to have their Sydney office open. So that's what I helped them do, bootstrap their Sydney office and build a team around it, and then went on to kind of learn a bit more about fintech, so financial technology, because there's a lot of noise about that, and that's kind of the fastest growing sector. And joined Iris, which was a startup. I think they claim they're one of the first IT startups in Australia, somewhere around 91, I believe. But by the time I joined, they were a fairly established company, and I kind of got my introduction there. I must admit, I might not have loved fintechs that much. So that's where I sort of moved on to what I do now. It's a company called CIM, and we try to help commercial buildings, so shopping centers and offices, reduce their carbon emissions. So I guess that's, I feel like I'm playing my part in trying to help climate change there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anton. And for those who aren't seeing that the live chat is happening, at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see chat and also Q&A. Start going to the Q&A, and as people are talking, the other panelists can also start answering your questions. So feel free to start asking your questions there as well. I want to turn over to Paul now to ask him about how he chose his path from all these different companies. Anything that the students should be looking at doing, and how did you choose all these different companies you went from one to the other?
Yeah, I sort of followed a couple of paths. What was similar to what Anton was talking about? What's the technology area, and is it something that I can see forward? Because you're normally in startups before that technology, in my experience, has become, important in the market. So when I chose my first startup, it was the expansion of personal computers and server-based computers. And so all of a sudden you went from mainframes to all of this computers all over the world. How did you manage it all? And that was an absolute nightmare. And so our software was focused on that. The other part, which was really important, is the people. So, as you start your career and you do interviews, you get a feel for the culture of an organization. Does that fit you and what you want? And then as I continued to grow through my career, I've worked for one person 3 times. I've worked now for someone for the second time in their startups as they started to go to other companies. So my good friend who I worked with at VMware, he went to this little company called Amazon back 8 years ago, when their AWS business, upon which many startups are built, had about 100 people in their organization, and he built that up to 20,000 people. And I didn't do that journey with him. I went somewhere else, but I'm now back with him and we're working together at Stripe. So for me, it was, is the technology interesting? And what's the culture and the people like? Because you're working with them all the time. And so you've got to like who you're working with. Otherwise, it's a real drag.
So it's about the people. And so for folks still at school, make sure you know who are your classmates in school and get to know them, and you may be starting a company with them or working with them in the future. So let's talk about how people are choosing their paths. Kirill, you mentioned a bit about Afterpay. Can you share more about your story of how you chose Afterpay? And then after that, I'll get Anton to perhaps what he saw in Mike and Scott to jump in with Atlassian.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I did mention that I had previously worked at PwC as an auditor, and I think I didn't realize it at the time, but what I really wanted in terms of, employment, was I really wanted to be part of something that I believed in, and that, something that, I could essentially help to create something. And for those of you who don't really know what auditing is, it's pretty much kind of like the exact opposite of that. It's a profession where you essentially check someone else's work to make sure that they're following the rules and regulations and that they're telling the truth about their financial facts and figures. So it was definitely opposite to, wanting to be part of something that, that you genuinely believe in, and creating something. And I guess to some extent, I was kind of disillusioned in working for a big corporate where I couldn't really see the value that I myself was actually helping to create. And I admit that, joining a startup wasn't initially the first thing that came to mind when I was looking to get out of PwC. And I think initially I was looking more towards the consulting side of things, so where you essentially help businesses solve their problems, help them grow. But as luck would, have it, one of the people who I knew from my days at the Australian Economics and Business Studies competition, she was actually working at CBA as a graduate, and she reached out and told me that her GM was going to move to a startup and wanted to know, if anyone was interested. And I applied without putting too much thought into it. I wasn't it's a bit weird to admit now, but I wasn't serious at the time about joining a startup. But I did think at the very least that, I could get some interview experience out of it. But then 3 interviews later, I joined. And again, what really got me over the line was I believed in what our founders were doing. I believed in what we were going to do. I believed in the potential of the company, and I guess the values of what Afterpay was trying to do really kind of like I identified with them. And that's how I made the move into Afterpay. The rest is history.
That's a great, I guess, a movement to Anton. Anton, how did you decide to join Mike and Scott?
Well, yeah, so they sort of came to me, right? So we knew each other from university, so I was lucky enough to know them from uni. So they kind of tapped me on the shoulder. But I guess for me, it was they were definitely one of the two brightest guys in our form, right? So I knew if anyone could build the company, it'd probably be them. Turned out to be right. And also, as I mentioned, it was a good time for me to take a risk. So startups are definitely a lot more risk than established companies. And before you sort of grow a family and have a mortgage, it's a lot easier to take a risk where you just kind of by yourself, and all you have to do is just make sure you can sort of buy tomorrow's lunch, or you have your parents to do it for you. And I suppose the third thing, like I said, it was just the love for creating software products, right? So I just didn't really have a lot of options to do that anywhere else. And when you add all those three together, ended up making that choice and jumping in.
Alex, maybe I'll get you to jump in here. I think some of the students may know what startups are, some of them don't. Could you talk more about startups and what is venture capital, and perhaps even give your thoughts on how Kirill and Anton were able to strike so lucky to join such amazing companies?
Yeah, sure. So basically a startup is, as it sounds, a new company that's being formed, usually to do something new, or to launch a new product, or to go and build something. And obviously we focus on startups in the technology space. So using technology, whatever that might be, and I'll tell you a bit about some of the different technologies we invest in, to try to sort of break new ground. Venture capital, what I do is we go and find the best new companies that are starting up, and we give them money in exchange for some ownership of the company. We don't typically own much of the company, so we might own 10% or 20% rather than taking like a controlling share. And the reason for that is what we're doing, particularly at the early stages, is finding founders, company founders, that we want to back for a really long time to build something great. And so some examples, or an example of that is a company called Canva, which you might use at school. I think it's in schools for free. And Blackbird first invested in Canva back in 2013, before they even had a product. So they just had an idea. So the two founders, Cliff and Mel, had an idea for something that they wanted to build. And I know it sounds crazy, but we gave them $250,000, which was a lot of money back then, before they had even built a platform for design. But what we saw when we met them was they were inspirational people who had an amazing idea, and they were doing something that felt like their life's work. So Mel, one of the founders, was very passionate about design. She had done some businesses beforehand and had an incredible idea about making it accessible to the general public. And she was completely obsessed about her product. And the funny thing is, there was no product for 6 months after we made our investment. And I wasn't here at the time, but the guys were sure that they'd blown their money. And then the product came out, and it really changed everything for design. So Canva now has hundreds of millions of users every day. Our initial investment of $250,000, just that investment alone is worth 900 million Aussie dollars. we've kept investing in Canva. We've now invested, since that first $250,000, we've invested another $250 million. And so it's all about finding passionate people who are doing something incredible that is their life's work. I'll tell you some other tech sort of things that we invest in. Canva's a good example. We've invested in guys that are building rockets in Queensland. In a way, they've built a rocket that uses much less component parts and is much, they think, cheaper and easier to operate. And so they're challenging the big rocket companies globally. So they're going to be launching from somewhere random in Queensland. Quantum computing, which is the next frontier of computing. So we've invested in a quantum computing company. We've invested in a bunch of people that are growing meat in a lab. So you're going to have lab grown food potentially coming, and that's obviously got huge environmental benefits. We've invested in some guys down in Wollongong who have found a way to replace the copper in solar panels with silver to reduce the cost. We invested in a company that's building the seeing eyes for autonomous vehicles. So those are the sorts of technologies, like groundbreaking stuff that we're investing in. And what venture capital does is it's very high risk. We know some of them are going to fail, but those winners are extraordinary, as you can see from that very first Canva investment. If you want to read a bit more about venture investing, I would read a book called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
Great. Awesome, Alex. And maybe you can just also round it out about how you move from what you were doing being a lawyer to actually doing what you're doing, which is helping run Blackbird. Can you share more about how you did that?
Yeah, sure. So look, I spent most of my career in companies that were looking at listed companies. So when I was an investment banker, we were doing mergers and acquisitions for companies that were listed on the stock exchange. Same with when I was a lawyer. If you're sitting in Australia and you're looking at the ASX, it's dominated by the big four banks, BHP and Rio, the guys drilling for oil out of the ground, and Woolworths and Coles. And so if you want to summarize all that, it is a play on housing, so house prices continuing to go up, digging stuff out of the ground and sending it to China, and selling shit in supermarkets, selling things in supermarkets. There's not a lot of innovation there. So I was sitting in an office tower in the city, wearing my suit every day, and I was reading about this stuff that was happening in Surrey Hills, where all these phenomenal new technologies were springing up, new businesses. Afterpay is one of the exceptions to the rule, which was listed and did do amazing things, but on the most part, that sort of quality of generational companies not available. So I was watching this happen just down the road, and I thought, I want to have a part of it. I want to have a part of this. I want to be part of it. It's a different world here. The culture is significantly better. They embrace diversity. And, I know a lot of you boys come from diverse backgrounds, as I do, as my classmates did back in 2000. And that is celebrated here in the startup world, as opposed to being something that could potentially hold you back in the listed world. And you only need to go and look at the composition of a bunch of the boards of the big listed companies and see that there's not much diversity there at all. And so being here in this startup world, there's diversity of thought, diversity of people, and there's people who are really passionate about what they're doing, as opposed to going into work to clip the ticket, doing audit, or billing your billable hours as a lawyer, or whatever it might be. So for me, I had seen Blackbird, I'd heard of them. I was fascinated by tech. I was fascinated by startups. And I actually, it's a whole nother story, but I actually didn't get the Blackbird job when I first interviewed. And I thought it was going to be the thing that got away, the one that got away from me in my career. And unfortunately, they came to their senses a couple of months later, and we sort of restarted the interview process. But yeah, just wanting to do something that, could potentially change the world, or where you're making a bigger impact as opposed to being one of 50,000 or 100,000 employees?
Thanks, Alex. I'm going to turn it back to Paul, Kirill, or Anton to really talk about what can you share with the students from working in a big company to taking risks in the startups? I know some parents here will be like, look, why don't you go work for a big company first, get some experience, go to a startup. Can you share about how they should be thinking about that career path? But I think before I pass it to one of you three who want to jump in, want to make sure also amplify what Alex was saying. It's all about opportunity. A few of you are mentioning you're not coming from where English is spoken as a first language background. Startups, it's all about innovation, it's all about diversity and opportunity, right? This is where you can really excel. I think that's where startups is awesome to be able to do that. So Paul, Kirill, and Anton, you want to jump in and answer the question?
Yeah, happy to start off, Chris. And then I think when we finish, might be also interesting to get a take on your career and how you ended up in the US with Google and so on. So, why don't we circle back after we do that question and get you to give the boys some background too. So what I did was again, my father as an immigrant wanted me to work for a big company, and I did, IBM. What I can say about the big companies is, as a graduate out of university, the training programs that many of them put on, be it, I don't know from personal, but a PwC, an IBM, the banks, the graduate programs they put on are phenomenal. So the training they give you, the exposure to different roles, it's fantastic. It also then gives you a feel for that sort of culture. So nothing wrong with going into a big company out of uni when you really want to learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible. But also obviously nothing wrong going straight into a startup on graduate programs. Typically is a larger organization. So, I'm putting a graduate program together, but, we're also 7,000 people now. So I keep telling my team we're a startup, but we're slightly bigger. What I found was I loved the culture of ambiguity in a startup. You had to do everything. I loved that. There were no boundaries. There were no processes and bureaucracy. We had to create them ourselves, which meant you just did what you had to do to ensure success and keep the company running forward. Once my startups, once I was there for a number of years and the startups now were significant in size, I found myself running businesses, right? Just keeping my hands on the steering wheel and driving forward and trying to get a bit more productivity every time. And, when people thought I was crazy leaving VMware, because it was probably one of the best leadership roles in the country, but that wasn't what drove my passion, right? So I went back to a company that had no people in Asia, and I was just by myself in a coffee shop, and I built that up to 5 countries and a couple of hundred people, and now I've gone on to Stripe. So you'll work out what your passion is, and if you're passionate about trying everything, dealing with uncertainty and change and ambiguity, and just wanting to be open to learning, startups are just a phenomenal place to be. If you feel like you need more structure and so on, then probably a medium to larger company can give you more of that. So hopefully that helps.
Kirill and Anton, you want to add anything else?
Sorry, I'm just typing out a answer to a question.
No worries.
What was the question?
It's okay if there's nothing else to add. So Anton and Kirill, from the risk taking, from working in a big company, getting experience going to a smaller company or startup, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of share my thoughts. So when I joined Afterpay, I was 24, going on 25. I was in a very early stage in my career, and I can tell you my thought process behind it. And again, this is my thought process. It doesn't necessarily apply to anyone else. It's not for everyone. It's not, your circumstances. You kind of need to take all of that into account. So obviously I was, 24 going on 25. I was, I would say a little bit unhappy with my job. And this opportunity of Afterpay came up. And at the time, I'm Like, I wasn't a risk-taking person, but just the size of the opportunity that was there. And I truly believed in what we were doing. I kind of thought to myself that, you know what, we're going to find out within 2 years whether or not this is going to actually work or not. And then it became a question of, am I willing to essentially give up 2 years of my life and a potential, promotion at PwC for this opportunity? Once you get comfortable with something like that, it just made it, I just took that leap of faith. And like, if it didn't all work out, I would have been 27. That's not particularly old or anything in the grand scheme of things. You've got an entire life ahead of you, right? Like, if you think about retirement age, that's 67. At 27, I would have had 40 years in front of me to actually figure out a career. So that's how I kind of got comfortable with that risk.
Awesome. And Anton, you mentioned you moved from Qantas to join two mates of yours. What can you share about that experience?
Well, they're definitely very, very different, right? So I think with larger companies, there's definitely a lot more structure, which potentially is a great, great thing. I think I fully agree with Paul. I think there's a lot of companies in Australia these days that have unbelievable sort of programs for graduates, but a lot of them involve rotation around the company, so you get to introduced to different facets of it. So you actually get a choice. Like, you can then learn what you like and what you don't like, and you can actually make a choice. I think it's very hard to make a choice if you haven't tried something, right? And then I think the truth is that a lot of startups, they try to become, I guess, larger companies, right? As they gain more and more success, I think very few companies worked out how to become more and more successful without hiring people. So a lot of them hire more and more people and sort of eventually become larger companies as well. And I think having experience and understanding what larger companies look like and what sort of having more structure in place and processes and, I guess, more defined roles, different people hold sort of different positions, what that looks like is potentially a really good thing. So I actually struggle a lot giving people career advice, because I think it's such a personal thing. Like, people are very different and different things work for different people. But I guess for me, I would actually advise for people to actually spend some time in a larger company when they graduate, before they sort of jump into a more chaotic environment. Because again, for those things, if you know where you're trailing towards, that can help a great deal.
Thanks, Anton. I guess Kira, did you want to add anything else to that? Sorry.
No, that was about it. Sorry, I just accidentally left myself on speak.
No worries. So I'll answer Paul's questions on my own personal background. As I mentioned earlier, Anton and I was class of 97. I ended up going to Sydney Uni. I didn't get to the course I wanted to in UNSW. It's not the end of the world. For those who may be trying to get into uni, especially this year, is such a tough year for everyone. So feeling for all of you who are at school or studying from home, but still at school. And what really opened up was these two links I put in the chat. Cornell University's exchange program with Sydney Uni. So UNSW or other unis didn't have a exchange program. Cornell's an awesome school, one of the Ivy League schools in the US. I ended up going on a 1-year exchange program, stayed there for my 5th year of uni. I did a commerce and arts degree. And from there, I ended up working for Expedia in a couple of different locations, and ended up wanting to move to New York or San Francisco. And I ended up moving to New York City in 2006, working for Google. And I moved there to essentially, there was the start of essentially Google's ramp up. This was before they bought YouTube, they had Android, and I ended up moving to the headquarters in 2013 to really work with venture capital firms and startups across all of Google's product areas. After a couple of years, I left as I saw an opportunity to help a lot of drivers and delivery people earn more money and essentially look at Uber and all the other areas. And the thing that really worked was this ex-Google community. So as a result of the community, you can sort of see the photographs behind me here. There's a lot of people who want to help Sydney High students. There's a lot of people who do want to help people doing startups. So I now run the 10,000 person community. There's a small fund as well that we invest in startups, and some of them have done really well. I guess we'll date this based on today's date and when Mr. Comden watches this video or shows it in his classmates. But check out the OpenSea NFT. They just hit $2 billion in gross bookings this month. And that company was started in 2018. So there's a lot of amazing things happening in cryptography and a lot of good things happening in NFT. So I would say that in terms of the question I was asking everyone, definitely setting yourself up in a big company makes a lot of sense. A lot of startups want to see the experience you've had from another place. And from there, you'll be able to branch out and essentially reduce the risk. But end of the day, by the time you work at a large company for a certain amount of time, a lot of startups may be looking at your experience as perhaps a bit too dated. So don't wait too long to jump into a startup. So I guess like the other question I had was really talking about your own experiences now and what suggestions you have for someone in year 12 if they were to join a company as an intern or vacation employment, the core programs. I know Anton mentioned the scholarship programs he did, the CBA program, but for four of you, if you were to perhaps be in year 12 now and think about what company should you join next year? Is there one or two companies that most excite you?
Yeah, I guess I'll have a stab. I think in terms of the transition between high school and university, I guess my top tip would actually be to just get involved in the various kind of university societies. Like I mentioned before, like how I actually managed to land in Afterpay. Just I knew someone at who I had previously kind of worked with in the Australian Economics and Business Studies Competition Society. We were both university students, and we, stayed friends. And I guess you kind of, as you have friends, you kind of complain to them about working life and this and that, and she was kind enough to think of me like when that opportunity came up, and she put my name forward. So I guess like my top tip is like, yeah, get involved in university life, get involved in societies. There are, various kind of societies catering to the degree that you will end up doing. And all of these kind of societies, they do have industry connections. So that's probably my top tip.
No, that's amazing. I think that the great takeaway is also do great work no matter what you're doing and where you are, whether it's clubs, societies, university, where other amazing people will look at you and perhaps invite you to join different opportunities. What about you, Alex, or Anton, or Paul?
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll go for it.
Sorry, Alex. Just sort of build on that point. I think one of the key things to a successful career and successful life really is your ability to network, how you are with people, how open you are to do different things, meet people from different backgrounds, and so on. The more you're outside your lane, worst thing happens is you learn something. You learn that you like it, or you learn you don't like it, but you're exposed there. And that opens a tremendous amount of opportunity. Also, I think when you're at university, look at what startups are around, and it's not hard to do. You can look at companies like Alex's and look at their website and who they're giving money to, and see what interests you, and approach that company. See if you can get involved somehow, even at a part-time level, or intern, or just helping them out in some way. You'd be surprised what startups will do early phase as well to get good people to help. So don't be shy, right? Don't be shy. Again, you send someone an email, the worst happens is they don't read it or they don't respond. Best that happens is something comes from that. And what I can say is I'm very lucky in my role. I get insight into thousands of startups that we're working with, and all I can say is the Silicon Hills of Surrey Hills there is certainly growing. It's amazing what access to capital has done for the technology industry in Australia over the last 10 years. As Anton was saying, 10 years ago, you had to go and ask mum and dad for money, or if you're lucky enough to have a house, try and mortgage it. Now you can access that. So innovation's coming from everywhere. I think by the time the kids at school today, by the time you graduate, that'll be even greater. So, keep your eye out now. Don't be afraid to send a founder an email, because you never know what you'll get back.
And that's great advice, Paul. And also even business leaders and CEOs, they want to hear from students. When I was 19, 20 years old, I sent an email to this person that was back then, there was a website called 9msn.com. Now it's just 9.com.au. His name's Steve Vamos. I've stayed in touch with him since 2001, 2000, and he's now the CEO of Xero. And so use youth as your advantage. Most people, whether it's all of us here or someone who's in there, who's CEO of whatever company, will usually respond if you tell them that you're a current student. So use that to your advantage before you get old like all of us. Who else wants to answer that question?
Yeah, I'd echo what everyone said. And I'd also say that there's no wrong choices here. So you're young and you're at the beginning of your journey, and the most important thing is to get a broad range of life and work experiences. So do an internship at an investment bank. You might like it, you might hate it. Become a lawyer for 9 months. That skill set, even though it wasn't a great 9 months for me, that skill set sticks with me now around analytical thinking and stuff like that. Don't worry that your first job is your career path forever. So I'm 38, which is feels insane to say because it feels like not that long ago that I was up in Moore Park. And if I look at my friends, I don't think there are any of them that are still doing the thing that they did straight out of uni. Everyone moves around a couple of times. So I would, in your degrees and then in what you do, I would suggest that you find something that you're interested in, that you're passionate about. Don't think about the end or the destination. Think about finding something that you really like, and just get involved in as many things as you can, whether that's at school or uni or beyond.
Awesome. I know we're about to run out of time, but anyone else wants to share more of their feedback and advice for current students?
Well, look, I'll just sort of reiterate what I said earlier, and I do notice that we've clicked over 156 people, which is a record for our webinar events. While you're at school, because I always get a lot of boys say, "Oh, what should I study? What should I study?" Obviously, it depends on what you want to do, but I found success by studying what I loved, and I got a great mark, and I got to the university course that I wanted. Now, I didn't want to be a doctor, so I didn't need all these physics and chemistry backgrounds, which is great because I would have been hopeless at those things. But I got to do my economics degree. Also, people are asking various questions about, what do you have to study computer science to get in to technology? And that's a great thing about this business is I'm hiring probably 200 people at the moment across Asia Pacific and Japan. And I'm hiring lawyers, I'm hiring engineers and programmers, I'm hiring salespeople, marketing people, designers, HR team members, on and on. Right? Technology really is an industry for everyone. You don't have to be on the keyboard coding. That's a great thing, particularly if you want to start your own company and build your own software. But the industry itself requires people across the business. It's just a great innovative industry to be part of. So if it interests you, and you have a path to study law, as Alex said, technology's there for you as well. So don't be limited by thinking you have to be a really techie person. You can still come to our industry.
I think just also going on from what Paul said, don't hesitate to try something, even if you're going to fail. I think part of it is failing. If you're not pushing yourself to the point of failure in safe ways, you're not trying things that you're perhaps not good at. And it's a great way to actually explore new things. And in terms of my own background, I applied for Google 3 times. It's only the 3rd time that I got in. And from Alex's own story, right? Blackbird made a mistake by not letting him the first time. But now he's doing a great job over there and doing some amazing things. So I think all of us have our own points of failure. And I think part of it is don't use that as sort of an excuse to do perhaps something easier. Keep at it if you really think that's the right thing that you want to be doing. So I guess on any closing thoughts in terms of careers advice or what any students should be doing next year if they go to uni. I think
I'd just say, in terms of your time at high, I really would savor every moment. Like, I know it's an uncertain world that you're coming out into, particularly for those of you guys who are in year 12. But I certainly don't think I realized it enough at the time how privileged I was to be there. It's a very special thing. There's only 180 of you every year at that school, and I know you're thinking about your marks and your future, and I know there's all kinds of pressure, but like, trust me, there's some of the best of times, and there's always pressure and there's always things to worry about after you finish school and have a family and all those sorts of things. So I would just really strongly recommend that you get the most out of your time there. I have an 18-month-old son, and I would really love for him to follow in my footsteps and sort of go to that school. And I really think that you guys are fortunate to be there, and you need to think of it like that because it's a really special place.
Yeah.
On that note, sorry, Anton, were you going to say something?
That really sort of resonated with me, because I think that's a mistake I made, right? Like, I was kind of the kind of person that was always planning for the future and maybe didn't allow myself to enjoy too many things, especially when I was younger, and kind of thought that I have all the time in the world. So you definitely have a lot of time, but eventually you will get to a point where you've got as much gray hair as me. And it's important to, I think, enjoy basically at every stage of your life. You've got to allow for some time to do things that you really, really enjoy, right? And not just study. Whatever it is that you enjoy, make sure that at any stage in your life you allocate some time towards it.
That's awesome. And a final note for myself: just look around you for your classmates, your parents, people you're perhaps doing sports with. Find ways to perhaps connect with them and also get to know them and help them. I think what I really found over the past few years is if you look at opportunities to help others, you end up getting a lot of help and assistance. And it's such a pleasure getting to know Paul, Kirill, Alex, and obviously Anton back from school as well. Savor the moment, push yourself to live in terms of whether it's job opportunities, careers, and don't be afraid of the hard stuff. And again, this is a tough year, past 2 years for all of you. So reach out if any of us can be helpful to you. And also there's a couple of different teachers, that who's, I guess, Mr. Huynh, also Mr. Combin. Go reach out to them if you can see what's behind here. They put that together. If you want to get connected to other folks in tech, they're here to support you. They're old boys as well. And finally, thank you, Paul. We know you're super busy with your job. We also know you serve on a couple of different charitable boards as well, but thank you for leading the Sydney High Old Boys Union. Everyone definitely support OBU when you graduate and you're a old boy yourself, but thank you for putting this night together. Thank you everyone for joining today.
Thanks, Chris. And look, on behalf of the old boys, thanks to everyone, Chris for hosting, Alex, Kirill, and Anton for sharing their stories. What we're trying to achieve with this is to just give you boys and your parents a view of different careers, that, for example, technology is not just one thing, law is not just one thing, medicine's not just one thing. There's a vast number of different things you can do across a career, and that's often sometimes hard to see when you're a student at school. So we're trying to just give you a bit of an overview of what's possible. If there's anything else you'd like to see, drop me a note off president at shsobu.org.au, or just go to our website, register, and drop me a note through there. Happy to help and put on more events as we go forward. I think this is the 7th one we've done in the last 12 months, and happy to always put new ones on. So thanks everyone, and good luck for the year 12 boys who are about to do their trials this weekend for your HSC, and hopefully you're back at school as soon as possible. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening.